Have you ever noticed how the smallest, quietest corners of life often hold the most powerful lessons? In a little town nestled in a peaceful corner of Japan, there lived a woman whose days passed without fanfare or applause. She woke before the sun, moved through her daily routine with grace, and returned home only when the city lights began to blink softly through the dusk. Her schedule was full, her responsibilities many, and yet there was something unshakably gentle in the way she lived. She wasn't wealthy. She didn't chase status. Her world was simple: her work, her home, and the man she loved. Her husband, a writer, spent most of his time at his desk, searching for words that would one day move hearts. So far, those words had not found their audience. His manuscripts gathered dust, but his spirit, while occasionally tired, remained quietly hopeful. They shared a modest apartment, nothing extravagant, but filled with little things that mattered. A pair of well-worn teacups, always clean and waiting. A window with soft light in the mornings. A bookshelf, mostly filled with drafts, but occasionally visited by a cat from next door who liked to nap between the pages. Despite the strain of long work hours and the uncertainty of creative pursuit, their home held something rare: peace. Not the kind of peace born from comfort or abundance, but the kind that is built gently, day by day. The kind that comes from choosing to believe in each other, again and again. Every evening, no matter how tired she felt, she made time for quiet moments together. A simple meal, a shared silence. Sometimes they would talk, sometimes they wouldn't. It didn't matter. What mattered was presence. She never measured life by achievement or possessions. For her, the small rituals meant everything. Supporting his dream wasn't a duty. It was a choice she made with love. She never needed him to be famous. She only wanted him to be fulfilled. And he, though wrapped in self-doubt and often tangled in his own thoughts, saw her. He noticed the way she always left the light on a little longer for him at night, the way she remembered the dates of every submission deadline, the quiet encouragement in her smile when he felt discouraged. He didn't always have the words to say it, but her belief in him mattered more than any publisher's approval. They weren't a couple that made headlines or posted their lives online, but there was a quiet beauty in how they supported one another. In a world that moves so fast, where success is often measured in numbers, they chose to measure it in trust, in effort, in kindness, and that made all the difference. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't involve dramatic gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes they're built slowly, like the layering of pages in a book. Her life was a reflection of this philosophy: consistency over noise, purpose over performance. She didn't expect perfection from her husband. She knew that every journey had setbacks. She simply chose to walk beside him without needing to control the path. And perhaps what made their bond so powerful was its simplicity. No grand expectations, no ultimatums, just two people growing in the same direction, even when the pace was uneven. She didn't see his lack of success as failure. To her, effort was success. Dedication was success. Trying over and over again, despite the silence from publishers, despite the rejection letters, that was courage. And so she worked, not just to keep food on the table, but to protect the fragile yet growing flame of hope between them. Each day she did so without resentment. She didn't see herself as someone who had sacrificed everything. She saw herself as someone lucky enough to love, and to be loved in return, even in imperfection. This kind of patience, This kind of steady, unshakable support, it doesn't always make for a loud story, but it's the foundation of something timeless. We often speak of love as fireworks, as passion, as excitement. But there's another kind of love, a quieter kind, one that shows up every day without needing to be seen, one that holds space even when things feel uncertain. And in that little apartment in Japan, filled with second-hand furniture, a flickering ceiling light, and dreams written in notebooks, that quiet love was alive. It didn't shout. It simply stayed. And for the woman who walked through long shifts and late nights with calm and care, that was enough. Because deep down, she believed something very simple, that if you nourish love patiently and kindly, without needing applause or validation, it will grow. Not always quickly, not always visibly, but it will grow. And in its own time, it will bloom. Then, one morning, everything changed. The email came quietly, without fanfare, tucked between a grocery promotion and a delivery confirmation. But as soon as the husband opened it, something shifted. His hands trembled just slightly as he read it once, then again, and then again. A respected publisher one they had long admired from afar had written to say, "We see potential in your work. We'd like to talk." For a moment, he simply stared at the screen in disbelief, and then he turned to his wife. She didn't need to hear the words. She could already see it in his eyes, that mix of disbelief and joy, the cautious excitement of a dream beginning to take shape. She walked over, and he read the email aloud, slowly, carefully, as if reading a blessing. And when he finished, she smiled one of those rare, full smiles that seemed to light the room from the inside out. Then she laughed, soft and relieved. No screaming, no celebration with noise. Just the quiet, deep joy that comes when something long hoped for finally arrives. They didn't have the means for a big celebration, but they didn't need one. That evening, they prepared a simple dinner together: miso soup, steamed rice, grilled fish. Nothing fancy. Just food that felt warm, familiar, and comforting. They set the table carefully, lit a small candle they'd been saving, and sat down side by side. During that meal, they didn't talk much about the future. They didn't plan their next steps or dream aloud about book tours or interviews. Instead, they looked at each other. They remembered the nights when he almost gave up, the mornings when she had packed his lunch while he stared blankly at the keyboard, the seasons that passed without progress, and yet never without effort. And in those quiet memories, there was something beautiful, a shared history of showing up for each other, even when nothing seemed certain. That night, after the dishes were done and the candle flickered out, they sat by the window with cups of warm tea. It was spring, and the plum trees outside were just beginning to bloom. The air smelled faintly of new beginnings. And as they looked out over the quiet street, they didn't speak much, but there was peace in the silence. In the days that followed, things moved quickly. The publisher requested edits, then offered a modest contract. Nothing life-changing, but it was a start. A door had opened. A chance had arrived. The husband dove into revisions, energized and focused, while the wife continued to work long hours, her days still as full as ever, but now colored with a quiet pride. She didn't expect anything in return. She didn't imagine fame or fortune. Her happiness came from knowing that someone had finally seen what she had always believed in, that the words he had poured his soul into had reached someone, had resonated. Even as deadlines approached and calls with editors became more frequent, they stayed grounded, the same routines, the same simplicity. They knew that external success was fleeting, but the care they had for each other, that was what mattered. That was the true reward. And perhaps what made it all feel so meaningful was how long it had taken to get there, how many ordinary days had passed, how many quiet evenings of encouragement, how many times she had said, "Try again tomorrow," with a smile that made failure feel like just another step on the path. When the first copy of his book finally arrived in the mail, they didn't frame it or make a big announcement. Instead, they opened the package together in the kitchen. He held the book in his hands, touched the cover gently, and then offered it to her first. She turned the pages slowly, eyes scanning the words she already knew, words she had watched him struggle with, rewrite, doubt, and eventually complete. And at the end of the book, he had written a quiet dedication: "To the one who never stopped believing, even when I did." She didn't cry. She simply placed her hand over his, held it there for a moment, and said, "I'm proud of you." It wasn't just pride in his success. It was pride in the journey, in the resilience, in the quiet way he had persevered, not alone, but with someone who had walked beside him every step of the way. That moment didn't come with music or camera flashes, but it was the kind of moment that stays, the kind that shapes a life. A reminder that even in the smallest homes, even between the most ordinary people, something extraordinary can bloom when love is patient, when effort is shared, and when success is defined not by numbers, but by meaning. And so, with one book published and many more ideas blooming, their journey continued, not transformed by fame, but made richer by understanding. Their story wasn't about reaching a destination. It was about the beauty of walking together through every season, with hope always tucked gently between them. Success, though beautiful, can sometimes arrive with unexpected weight. After the initial joy of the husband's first published book, a quiet tension began to settle into their home. The pressure to maintain success crept in, gentle at first, then gradually more present. The publisher, once enthusiastic and warm, now sent firm reminders and deadlines. Expectations grew. But creativity doesn't always follow a schedule. Days passed, and the husband found himself staring at blank pages longer than before. The ideas that once flowed freely now felt distant, unreachable. Frustration began to color his expressions, replacing the quiet confidence he once carried. At home, conversations grew shorter, mealtimes became quieter, and though the physical space remained unchanged, the emotional atmosphere shifted subtly, like the weather. But the wife, she noticed everything. She could have asked questions. She could have expressed worry or even disappointment. But instead, she chose presence over pressure. She quietly made his favorite tea in the afternoon, left the window open for fresh air where he worked, and kept the house calm and steady. She didn't offer grand solutions. She simply offered peace. Sometimes, late at night, she would hear him sigh from the other room. She never interrupted. Instead, She made sure the hallway light was left on, just enough to guide him when he needed it. When he couldn't sleep, she stayed awake with him, saying little, just letting silence do the work that words could not. There were moments when his silence felt heavier than any conversation could be, but her patience never faded. She understood that support isn't always loud. It can be the quiet rhythm of someone staying, even when the other seems lost. She kept up the daily routines, working, preparing meals, folding laundry, with the same care and energy as before. She smiled gently when they passed each other in the kitchen, not out of denial, but as a gentle reminder that even in difficulty, love could still be simple. One evening, as he sat quietly at the edge of their bed, overwhelmed by doubt, she came over and sat beside him. She didn't ask about the writing. She only said, "You've already done something beautiful. That doesn't disappear. But even if nothing more comes tomorrow, I'll still be here." There was no grand music, no dramatic moment, just two people sitting in a small room, choosing to believe in each other again. In the world outside, deadlines loomed, but inside that home, her quiet strength became his anchor. One morning, not so different from the others, he sat in front of his computer as he had for months. But this time, something felt different. He wasn't trying to chase a market trend or please a publisher. He wasn't thinking about what would sell or what might go viral. He was thinking about her, about the woman who had believed in him when even he couldn't, about the nights she stayed up just to sit beside him, and the mornings she quietly prepared his coffee even after sleeping only a few hours, about the way she carried her own burdens with grace, never once using them to make him feel small. He realized then that the greatest story he had ever lived was not the one on a bookshelf. It was the one unfolding every day inside their home. And maybe, just maybe, the world needed to hear that story too. So, he began writing, but this time, not as a writer searching for success. He wrote as a husband wanting to honor what had been real. There were no fictional names or dramatic twists, just the quiet truth of two people choosing to keep walking together, even when the road was hard. He wrote about their simple meals and silent dinners, about the long walks through narrow streets, the shared umbrella in the rain, the evenings spent watching clouds through the window. He wrote about the doubt, yes, but also about the gentle courage it takes to keep believing in someone when they've stopped believing in themselves. And at the center of it all, he wrote about her, not as a side character, not as someone waiting in the background, but as the anchor of the story, the heart of it, the reason he had ever found his way back. The book was published a few months later. It didn't promise anything grand. There were no bold titles or dramatic blurbs. Just a simple cover, a quiet dedication, and a story that resonated more deeply than either of them could have imagined. Readers didn't just read the story, they felt it. People wrote letters. Couples shared it with one another. It became not just a book, but a reflection. A mirror held up to the quiet love many people live, but rarely see acknowledged. As the recognition grew, the invitations came. Events, interviews, awards. But just as things seemed to be reaching a new high, something unexpected happened. He left. There was no drama, no argument, no final conversation. One morning, he was simply gone. A letter remained. It wasn't long, just a few handwritten lines left on the desk, where he once struggled to find words. This story was always ours. You made it possible. I need to go find myself beyond the words. But please know, I carry you with me in everything I do. For a long moment, she stood quietly in that room. But she didn't cry. She didn't shout. Instead, she breathed. It wasn't easy, but she understood something that many never do. That love doesn't always mean holding on tightly. Sometimes it means letting go gently, without bitterness, trusting that what was shared was real and enough. She continued her days as before, working, cooking, watching the seasons pass. The apartment was quieter, but not empty. Memories lingered, and love, when true, doesn't vanish. It simply changes form. A copy of his book sat on the windowsill beside a plant they once revived together. Sometimes she'd reread a passage, not from longing, but gratitude for their journey and for the quiet strength of love that asks nothing in return. Life slowly filled in again. New days, gentle peace. When asked, she'd smile and say, "We shared something beautiful." Because what mattered wasn't how it ended, but how deeply it was lived. Love at its best is not loud. It gives. It waits. It forgives. And it remains kind, even when life shifts. She had loved with grace and stayed whole. And that, too, is strength. Some stories aren't written in books, but in hearts, and hers was one of quiet beauty.